Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
I Om Vishnupad Purnamansa Paripradjikacharya Stotra Sri Srimad A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Shri Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sakaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sham Kund Radha Kunikiri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadip Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Ki Jai Ganga Mai Ki Jai Jamana Mai Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande. Welcome to all. I'm just going to switch to my computer from my phone.
Maharaj got muted.
Yeah. Okay, give me a moment. Yes, I think I can do that. Okay. Now I'm computerized and not phoned, so we're good.
Okay. Am I a host?
Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Shaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschate Deshatarane Pancha Kolpatarubhyascha Kripasinto Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Shadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Yes, move myself over 6 inches and then we're good. So I wonder who has any, well, just to bring up those for the last few days, our Bhagavatam class on Tuako channel was suspended or merged with memorial meetings for his Gulal Prabhu, who's an old friend of mine and of many devotees, a doctor, a medical doctor, and originally from East Bengal, who passed away just ago. And we've been having, before he passed away, actually every night there was kirtan for him for about 3 hours by devotees from different places, especially Tuaco and central New Jersey, where he'd been a long time member of the congregation. And he'd retired. We're talking about the Vanaprastha ashram. He was on my list of retirees because he'd gone to Mayapur a couple of, well, a year or two, I guess it must have been about 2 years before. He'd packed up his other duties and retired with his wife to Sridham Mayapur, and was living very happily there and hearing and chanting. He was a big fan of hearing and chanting. But suddenly it was discovered that he had a cancerous brain tumor, very aggressive. So his sons, he has 2 grown sons, brought them, he and his wife, back to Los Angeles. The doctors did what they could, but the family realized that pressing ahead with radiation and chemo and all of that was pointless, that it would just prolong, if it would, misery, really. So they elected to bring him home for home hospice care and took wonderful, loving care of him. And then he passed away a few days ago in the midst of kirtan with, everything glorious. So it was a successful end. And his son last night his eldest son had told the story last night, because his father in his last days couldn't communicate really. He didn't speak for the last several weeks. He was alert, but couldn't really speak. Sometimes alert, sometimes, taking pain medication and so on. But generally, in touch with what was going on around him. And his son told the story how he took him for a sort of a wheelchair excursion just to get some air, and asked him that this is what we're going to do. We're going to just suspend treatment and prepare for the end, prepare for for leaving and moving on, and asked him for permission. Is this all right? And he said his father closed his eyes and then opened his eyes and then nodded. So I hadn't heard that before, but he told that story last night. So I thought it was beautiful. First of all, how he'd asked for permission, and then second of all, how he received it. So it was a very exemplary life. He was a wonderful devotee and used to love to render service, and always jolly and always full of verses, Bhagavad Gita, or different verses, and very Krishna conscious, very wonderful, and a very successful end. It's been for some days, and kirtan is still going on for days. On there's a set up by it's kind of New Jersey. So kirtan before he left, kirtan after he left, very exemplary. So I thought I'd mention that here, because as was discussed many times over the last few days, all of us are heading in that direction. So it's so good to have examples of devotees who successfully complete the course. All right, are there some topics that you'd like to bring up? Let me look at the chat box first of all. I see that there's at least one thing there. Can I tell you the name of the devotee? Yes, his name is Nanda Dulal Das. Nanda Dulal, he's a disciple of Bhakti, of His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj, and he he has two sons. Sometimes people from the younger generation know his sons better. Abhijit and Manu are his two sons. His eldest son is married now. Younger son is not. And they're very, very fine young men. Really fine young men. Let me just merge something here. It's not merging anyway. Oh, I see. Exit full screen and then merge. Merge, yeah. Okay. There we go. And Suman's in 2019, he was so enthusiastic. Yes, very enthusiastic devotee, very just wonderful devotee. So many devotees were appreciating how he inspired them, how he cared for them, how he served them. Just a wonderful devotee. Just a wonderful devotee. His wife is also a wonderful devotee, very focused on deity worship and learned in Shastra, and really Krishna conscious. The whole family is just such an excellent family. Okay, are there some topics that you'd like to talk about or that anyone would like to talk about? Where to draw the line, Praveen says, between willing to live or give it up and prepare for death? That's often a question. One may face that question: Do I live or do I give it up? Sometimes it's clear. Sometimes, even though it's clear, people don't get it. You know, it's there in like 12-foot letters that the end is that it's over, and still they don't want to face it. You know, the doctor, couldn't you do this? Couldn't you do that? Probably quoted some friend or cited the example of some friend. Couldn't you just give me a few months more? I haven't finished my this, my that. But people, even where it's obvious, they still won't give up. But then among those who are detached, who are not mad, but who see things, then it's a question: do we press ahead or do we call it a day? Uh, I look toward Prabhupada's example, where first of all he did what he could. He tried going to Rishikesh himself. He tried going to Bhaktivedanta Manor, this and that. But then at a certain point, he just said, "Let me go to Vrindavan. Let me die in Vrindavan." He saw that this is all heading to death. Let me die in Vrindavan. And there also, it was like we're willing to leave, then we were willing to let him go. Please stay with us. Devotees are encouraging or pleading with him to stay, or trying to find some way to encourage him to stay. But but I think he was more inclined toward leaving. But then, the history. At one point, he asked the GBC, "What do you think?" and so on, and he made some attempt to stay, but he was really ready to go, and not under any illusion that somehow or other to extend it. And he was more, he wanted to see that even sometimes he would consult the astrological predictions. Let's have some fun and see what they say. And they'd say, "Oh, this day is bad, and this day is good, and this day is bad." And this kind of gem may help. Mantras on this day, mantras should be chanted. Mantras should be chanted. Then Prabhupada he'd seize on that. Yes, Amala Harinam Amiya Vilas. So his real theme was leaving. His real theme was leaving. Or his real theme was surrender. That as Krishna desires, although at one point he said, Krishna says it's up to me. But in general, surrendering to Krishna. Me to live, I'll live. If Krishna wants me to die, I'll die. And then seeing the indications, where then it's a personal decision that everyone who's in a position to make it can consider. Should I try to keep it? I leave. Even this year, Yogeshwara Prabhu's mother, who's not a practicing Hare Krishna devotee by any standard, decided to give up eating and drinking and leave. She just considered that further treatment, further interventions would be pointless, and better just to leave voluntarily. So, very, what would you say, a brave and intelligent decision. What are you going to live for, lying in a hospital bed with no reason to try to push on? So she voluntarily gave it up. Parikshit Maharaj, of course, let me just sit by the bank of the Ganges and have the blessings of Mother Ganga and the sages and hear Srimad Bhagavatam. So we look toward Krishna's indication. Of course, there's even from the mundane point of view, a cost-benefit analysis is what will I get by living on? Is there any point to it? but especially what is Krishna's desire, and let me surrender to Krishna's desire. Suman Prabhu had his hand up, and Tulsi Priya has a question. Suman.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Maharaj, I remember reading in Bhakti Charu Maharaj, Ocean of Mercy, that for a few days.
You have to unmute Mr. Shuman.
Yeah, I'm unmuted.
We can hear him.
Hare Krishna.
Okay, you're unmuted, Shuman. You can speak. But I see. Looks like I have an app that's playing this. Quite nice, but I think I should stop it. Okay. Shuman, did you want to say something?
Yes, Maharaj. Am I audible?
You can turn your off.
Maharaj, am I audible now?
Oh, okay. It's my side, I think, that's not giving me volume. Let me just check that. Is that? No, my sound should be good.
I can hear him.
Does everybody else get that? That Suman's speaking but not being heard?
We are hearing him.
You're all hearing him.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, now I'm set. Okay, go ahead, Shuman. Now you should be good.
Am I audible now?
Now you are.
Okay, Hare Krishna. Maharaj, I remember seeing in Bhakti Charu Maharaj, Ocean of Mercy book, he mentions that Prabhupada wasn't eating for some days. And then Prabhupada was saying, I'm just going to leave my body now. Don't disturb me.
Yes.
Then Maharaj prays and requests Prabhupada, why are you doing something like that? And then Prabhupada to reply spiritual masters to say you pray to Krishna. And then Prabhupada becomes when he goes to London. And then he actually stays for another year.
Yes.
So is it like that devotee can be delayed or something like that? Because I did not understand something about this fasting of Prabhupada.
Well, of course, it's a deep subject matter. Did Prabhupada have, the authority to decide when he would leave, or was it entirely up to Krishna? The Prabhupada, of course, took it that it was up to Krishna, and there's a certain amount of we try for something. Like Prabhupada, even in other subjects and earlier times, he would sometimes say, all right, let us try for it. Let us try to get this building. Let us try to do this. Let us try. And then if it didn't work out, sometimes he would say, all right, Krishna didn't desire. So from our side, we try, but then sometimes we see that it's not Krishna's desire. It doesn't appear to be Krishna's desire. But at one point, and those who want to look deeply into the history, Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita describes in considerable length the Prabhupada's departure pastimes. At some point, Prabhupada met with the GBC, and there was some discussion. So, what do you want? And we want you to stay. And then somehow or other, it came to, well, it's up to Krishna. And then it came to, Krishna says it's up to me. So then what do you want? We want you to stay. And then Prabhupada just said, all right. Just said, all right. And then he took some Jews and, made some further attempt to stay. But it wasn't Krishna. Finally, Krishna desired to take him. And Prabhupada didn't make, his greater concern, don't take me to the hospital. Many times he said, do not take me to the hospital. He didn't want that kind of intervention. He said, one of his godbrothers said, so many, the disciples were very proud that their spiritual master had all this medical treatment in the hospital. And Prabhupada said, don't take me to the hospital. So he was surrendered, that as Krishna may desire. Krishna Todiya Padapankaja Panjarantam. But let me remember Krishna, that's all. So really for such a perfect example of leaving this world, we can all review that discussion in Prabhupada Lilamrita. Because every one of us is heading to that test. Every one of us will have to go, and some of us may leave suddenly and with, not without warning, and others may, as Nanda Dulal Prabhu did, face some choices and have some time. So then, what do we do? What do we do? So the most important thing is Ante Narayana Smriti, at the time of death, to remember Krishna. So we're trying to prepare to live in such a way that at the end, our mind will be focused on Krishna. Antakale chamameva smaran muktva kalevaram ya prayati samadbhavam yati nastyatra samshaya. For one who remembers, leaves this world remembering Krishna, the path back to Godhead is clear. Shuman asks, should we take medical treatment if I know in the future I have some terminal disease, or directly leave for Mayapur and Vrindavan? But these are the decisions. At some point you say, do I try to do something, or do I just go? That, at a certain point, at some point you may say, all right, let me try to go on, let me take this treatment or that treatment. And sometimes devotees, let me try this, let me try that, let me try this. There's some faith healer in Brazil. We heard there's a mystic in Switzerland. There's this, there's that. Let me try this, let me try that. And they try this and that. And when nothing else works, they think, all right, let me pack it all in and go to Vrindavan. Others, they just early, they say, all right, let me go. And they don't want the treatments or the this or that. And others somewhere in between, they'll even go to Vrindavan and take some treatment, try to go on living. Prabhupada was still taking medicine in Vrindavan. The doctor was trying. So one may do that. But finally, the devotee is surrendered to Krishna. And everything is in Krishna's hands. It's not in my power to go or stay, but let me prepare to go. Even if I'm making some attempt to stay, let me be prepared to go. I remember when Prabhupada came to New York City the last time, I just noticed that he was chanting. Every moment he got, he was chanting on his beats. In previous visits, he was more, talking with the devotees and this and that, but he was like conspicuously, every spare moment, chanting intently. Yeah, I noticed that. and the end is coming. And there's something here in the chat box. Let me open it up. So yes, should we take medical treatment or not? You have to decide. Of course, we know that hospitals, well, for being in the hospital, the doctors could give assurance for cure after the operation. Would it be a fault to override the doctor's preference for an operation, which are painful, and live simply with hospice care and leave the body? You can do that. You can do that. The doctors generally try to give assurance, and we can do something. But sometimes, even we had one very nice devotee in London, Harivangsha, beautiful devotee, loved by all. And he had some minor operation, and he went into the hospital, and that was it. Left on the operating table, most unexpectedly. So that Bhagavatam verse is there, that sometimes you have the best doctor and not very serious disease, and then you die. And sometimes the disease is practically incurable and the doctor is not available and you live. So it's not finally in the doctor's hands or in our hands, it's in Krishna's hands. And it's up to the devotee to decide with his best intelligence and best advice, and depending on Krishna, what do I want to do? Do I want to try try A, try B, try C, try D? Or do I just want to surrender, let me go? I don't know that there's a wrong choice. It's not for me to sit here in relatively good health and say, you should do this, you should do that. Every one of us who's presented with that situation will have to decide what do I want to do. But there tends to be a bias these days toward try everything. There's a book by an Indian surgeon in Boston who's a very good writer, also well published, and writes for the New Yorker a lot. Atul Gawande. He's published a book called Being Mortal. And a large theme of the book is that in the medical profession, we're trained to think, let me somehow or other keep the patient alive. And the doctors don't want to give up. They somehow or other, we can still try this or we could still try that. But devotees particularly may have a different perspective on life. That it's not the goal of life just to somehow or other stay alive at any cost. Our goal is to this world remembering Krishna, not to have the most number of possible days. So you can think about that. By the way, from a very practical point of view, who has advanced directives? I wonder whether you have advanced directives. From Kamalini's face, she doesn't know what advanced directives are.
Is that like if you're unable to make decisions and things like that?
Yes.
Yeah. I have a form. I haven't picked it up yet. I haven't signed the contract with death yet.
They're very good to do because they give you the opportunity to specify what you want done. The standard, you can download the forms for your state. In America and even abroad, I think the same arrangement is there. According to where you live, there'll be free legal forms available online. You download it. In America, you just fill it out in the presence of a witness. It doesn't even have to be notarized. And it's done. And it consists of two parts. One part says, this is what I want to have done or not done. In the event that I'm not in a position to say, here's my direction, my instructions in advance. You can do that. And part two is what they call a springing power of attorney. It gives authority to someone else to to act on your behalf. So for example, if you have bank accounts, which would otherwise be inaccessible, the person can pay your bills or do whatever it needs to be done. They can make medical decisions. They can sign things on your behalf. They won't have that power unless you go into that situation. If you reach that situation where you're unable to communicate and so on, then they have the power. It makes things much cleaner. The hospital staff doesn't say, well, we'll have to contact your parents or your older brother or your next of kin or your daughter. You already have it set up. Very much advisable for devotees to fill them out. I've had advance directives in place for the past 20 years or so. And as I said, they are free and worth doing. Apart from having a will also. And Tulsi Priya says, what's nice about advance directives and power of attorney is that the decision isn't dumped on family during a crisis. I think without power of attorney, you need a court order, too much stress. Yeah, this way everything's settled up. Everything's settled up and you communicate also with the person you're giving power of attorney to, so that they know what you want, and they agree to taking the responsibility. You can find out more about this online. It's easily available and doesn't cost anything. And also gets you past, sometimes non-devotees have the authority by operation of law. They may have your relative or the doctors. So this way you decide instead of having others decide, or even having devotee family members decide under stress. Yes. And their devotees, His Holiness Giriraj Maharaj has given a lot of attention to hospice care. And the Bhaktivedanta Hospice is there in Vrindavan. Her Grace Sangeeta Dasi, my god sister, is a registered nurse. She's given a lot of attention and help so that devotees can avail themselves of this kind of service, this option to not just to be stuck in aggressive medical attempts to save life, but to surrender to the dying process. Even among the materialists, this has become recognized as a more worthy way of leaving. And what to speak of devotees who have the highest purpose in mind. So Giriraj Maharaj, Sangeeta have given a lot of attention here, a lot of attention for devotees. There's a devotee I had lunch with yesterday, Jai Chaitan, here in the Alachua area, who's working in hospice care and who has in mind, as part of doing that, to be able to extend service for devotees. So we're all moving in that direction. We're all in the queue for leaving this world. And the more that we prepare ourselves by cultivating spiritual knowledge, by cultivating attachment to Krishna, by cultivating detachment from this world, the more successful we can be in this final test. Tulsi Priya says, Sangeeta Mataji was offering a course for the layperson in hospice care, which I took. I don't know if she's still offering those courses. It's a good thing for everyone to learn, even if you take a course with a non-devotee. And thank you. Are there other thoughts or questions here? There were a couple of things up. Hold on a second. Yes, I see your hand there, Tulsi Priya. I'll be with you in a moment. I remember Kendra suggested that I could talk about nectar of instruction. Yeah, that's a possible topic. And there was something else, but it's too hard to find. It was also about what we can talk about. Oh, yeah, there's Kendra's topic. Nectar of instruction. Okay. Tulsi Priya, you had your hand up.
Yes. Related to the question of whether or not to take medical intervention when we have an illness, I have noticed that there are a lot of times devotees, mostly it's cancer. They get diagnosed with cancer, and then they do not want to do anything with the conventional medicine. They want to resort to herbs, to healers. And I remember one young man who had testicular cancer. He did not want to go with conventional medical treatment, even though it is probably one of the most curable cancers through medical treatment and the most deadly if you don't take medical treatment. And I didn't even know him. I heard about him through other devotees. He was a second generation. And I said, I never give this advice to anybody, but please don't do this, don't do this. Take medical intervention. You'll be suffering for a little while, but then, it'll be all over. Obviously, it's up to Krishna. But anyways, he didn't do it. And then he went through some herbal treatment and he had to leave his home and he had to go to another country and all this stuff. And then his cancer came back, and then he went to conventional treatment and then he died. And I was just thinking to myself, it seems like sometimes we make a sort of auxiliary religion of natural medicine, which I'm not against, but I just wonder, if something seems to be practical and will have good results, and also if you're a young person, why not take those interventions if they're practical and simple? And it seems like there's also a good opportunity to preach if you're in a hospital and it's not expected to be fatal. I mean, I guess it confuses me because I think ultimately it is up to Krishna, and so then it's the devotee's choice basically of how they want to die, whether they're going to die because of herbal treatments or they're going to die because of hospital treatments. So I get a little confused about how one should make that decision, because I know how we've made decisions in the past and they worked out, the way we hoped.
Well, there seems to be sort of a question and an observation there. And the question is, like, to what extent do we shun Western medical treatment in favor of Ayurvedic or homeopathic or herbal or what have you? And the second is sort of an observation that whatever path you take, it's finally up to Krishna. Your herbs may work or not work. Your surgery may work or not work. And that's certainly a valid observation, that nothing works unless Krishna wants it to work. And even the most absurd things can work if Krishna desires. I was told by one devotee in Mayapur, he's a British devotee, is a well-educated person, and his son, they were out in the middle of a village or something, and his son broke his leg, and somehow or other there was this healer there, and they brought him to this healer who wrapped up the leg in leaves and some sort of this and that, and real voodoo. And then later he brought the boy to the hospital in Calcutta, and the doctor said to him, you're an educated person. What are you doing with all these, all this witch doctory? And then they did x-rays and he said, well, something's working here. Because it sort of unexpectedly healed quickly. So, and I've seen witch doctory work also in my own case. And I've seen it also go very bad. I've seen, Ayurvedic medicine that was really misprescribed, and, Ayurvedic doctors, there's like not a rigorous standard as to who can practice. So there's all sorts of things going on. Anyone can hang a shingle out and become a healer or a mystic or a this or that. And sometimes there is a tendency on the part of devotees to be, what's the word, uncritical about, very hypercritical of Western medicine and totally uncritical and credulous about anything else. So again, it's up to your best judgment. There's no like Krishna conscious answer. Herbal medicine is better, Western medicine is better. Our Yamaraj Prabhu survived unexpectedly for many years by taking what was essentially herbal treatments from an outfit out in the West Coast someplace. So, but then he left. So that's the conclusion, that whichever modality of treatment we take or don't take, death is inevitable. That's for sure. And what you choose to do in advance, that's up to your best judgment. And you can, if we're consulted, we can give our best thoughts. But finally, it's up to the person or whoever is in charge of making that decision to decide, well, what are we going to do?
Thank you.
I can tell a story. I'm not advocating by any means for, stick with alternatives and don't take Western medicine, because, sometimes Western medical treatment is very good. And Prabhupada said, whatever works. But I remember one time, it was one of the early Mayapur festivals. I think the Long building was just under construction, or maybe it was even the Lotus building that was still under construction. It was really quite early. And in those days, devotees used to come from all over the world to be with Prabhupada, and, whole airplanes would come with devotees from America coming to be with Prabhupada. And that year, Amarendra Prabhu came. And his wife, Gayatri, had baked one or more cakes. And Amarendra brought this cake with him. And the power pyramid in ISKCON being what it was at the time, the sannyasis who were present were the ones who got that cake, seized the cake and devoured it. But the cake had gone from like Alachua to Gainesville, Gainesville to New York, New York to London, London to Calcutta, then Calcutta, so many hours to Mayapur. And by the time these sannyasis ate the cake, it was poison. And I remember looking on the unfinished roof of this building and seeing these sannyasis like writhing in agony and vomiting and totally, and in the middle of Mayapur, which at that time was like just out in the rice fields. And these sannyasis are retching and writhing. And they asked Srila Prabhupada what to do. And Prabhupada said, give them some Charanamrita, they'll be all right. And that's what they did. And that's what happened. So, so sometimes it's just give them Charanamrita. It's a question of faith also sometimes. And of course it's, Prabhupada's direction. On the alternative side, well, I won't even mention it, but I know that sometimes devotees have received advice from their senior devotees that have been so bad that it cost them their life. So one has to take it very thoughtfully and responsibly, and not by some unconsidered bias, but by intelligence and good advice. And finally, by chanting Hare Krishna and depending on Krishna. That's the main thing. Yes, Tulsi Priya.
I just wanted to add, one time I was stricken with a stomach bug and I didn't know it at the time, and I got very sick and everything was coming from everywhere. And I called up the emergency room and I told them what I was going through, and they said, oh, there's a stomach bug going around. Don't worry about it. You'll be fine in 24 hours. And I was really suffering and I thought I was dying. That's how much I was suffering. And I told my husband, asked my husband, just please read Bhagavatam to me. So I was lying in bed and he sat there reading Bhagavatam to me. And all of a sudden I said, excuse me. And I ran to the bathroom one last time and I was completely fine after that. So every time I ever get really, really sick, even though I may be taking all kinds of medicine, visit the doctor, but I ask my husband, just read Bhagavatam to me. And it always has some power to make me feel better, even if I don't get cured immediately.
Bhavosarat Shrotamano Bhiramat. The real medicine is Krishna Katha. That's the real medicine. Nivrittataya Shire Bhagiyamana Bhavosadach. It's the Oshadhi, the medicine for repeated birth and death, Pavoshadhi, Shrotamano Bhiramat, and is pleasing to the ears and to the mind. Ka uttama shloka gunanavadat. Who's such a fool that he wouldn't want to go on hearing and hearing the transcendental qualities of Uttama Shloka, Krishna. What is that? Ka uttama shloka gunanavadat puman virajeta bina pashugnat. Unless he's a meat eater or a person who's killing his own self. Pashugnat. Puman virajeta bina pashugnat. For the benefit of those who may be interested, I'm going to post the Zoom link for the kirtan that's going on for 10 days for Nanda Dulal Prabhu. It goes from 6:30 till 9, I believe. And those who wish can join the Zoom meeting. Just a point for those who may know the family or those who may wish to join. It's for the last 3 days, there's been mostly glorification and discussion. And now I think it's simply kirtan for 10 days. And I'm sorry, I sent that to Prabeen when I should have sent it to everyone. There it is. Okay, now it's posted to all. We have 3 minutes more. We have three. There's, while I'm thinking of it, yes, Kamalini.
Well, originally you asked for suggestions, and I see now people are making suggestions, and I suggested that we can ask questions from our reading of scripture, like just, random questions. And,
yes.
But it seems that it would have to go a lot faster, because sometimes it's like almost the whole hours on just one question. I don't know. So anyway, I still have that desire. So maybe next time, and others, whatever in our reading, whatever question we come upon, or even maybe wanting to share a very poignant point, or sentence that Prabhupada said, a striking sentence, and maybe, what do they call that when you unpack it, things like that.
Yeah. Thank you, Kamali. That was my original idea also. I'm not really looking for suggestions of seminars that Four Rules just popped up as being a topic that I'm enthusiastic about and seemed to warrant discussion. But my original idea was exactly what you said. You just, anything goes. Ask a question, and they don't have to be themed.
Sequential. Yeah.
Excuse me. Yeah, they don't have to be on one topic or themed. Just whatever you'd like to bring up, either as your thoughts or as your questions, and we can exchange ideas on different topics.
Especially doubts, I would say.
Doubts make wonderful topics for discussion. What about the Goswamis? Their books in some places are very rich, but something that seems contradictory and like explore it instead of saying or other, it all I'm sure it's all fits together. They get into it and they look for the answers, and then you find the result is that you get so much deeper and you find these wonderful explanations from scripture and so on. So we may not do that kind of research, or certainly not the six Goswamis, but we can dive into these different topics, doubts, questions, and it becomes enlivening. And we can skip around from topic to topic, and I can try to avoid also just like, although sometimes a topic may be so good that we'll want to stick on it for, 20 minutes, half an hour, or even the whole time. But
yeah, or even weeks on end.
yeah, I'm going to go on and on. But I generally like when we can move from question. Tina was saying, yay, questions and answers, and sort of keep things moving on from question to question without pushing them, so that we don't give sufficient depth, but without having to sort of lock things in. We're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about this. We can move around. And I don't know what, I know Suman's been working with Tulsi Priya on this 10 offenses subject matter. So we'll have to see. I don't know if we'll open up another day or what we'll do here with that. But I'm inclined toward accepting your suggestion as being in line with my own thoughts also. And now we're at 8 o'clock. I think Tuaco hasn't yet resumed their nightly program. They are going to move back to a program every weeknight. We were always ending exactly on time to be there for to allow everyone to get on to their channel. But there's something to be said at any rate for ending on time. So we'll thank you all. Our Bhagavatam classes on the Tuaco channel, at least my Bhagavatam classes, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, will resume. We'd suspended them for the program for Nanda Dulal Prabhu, but they will begin again on Friday. All right. My thanks to you all. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Hi, Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Hare.
Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Thank you.
Thank you,
Hare
Gurudev.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Lakshmana. Jaya.